It applies in three ways. And really you can apply it to the very words that Jesus said about Himself. In John chapter number 14, verse number 6, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. You look at this royal robe that He is wearing, we could say it is the garment of a priest. He is the way. You don't know how to get to God? He's the way. You don't need me to pray for you. You don't need me to lay a wafer on your tongue. I mean, I'll pray for you. If you want me to shove something in your mouth, I'll be glad to do that, but that ain't going to get you to God. We don't need a priest right now. We have a high priest in Jesus Christ. Not only is it seen as priest, he's seen there as prophet. I am the truth. Hey, here's what I'll tell you. God will always tell you the truth. He'll tell you the truth when you like it. He'll tell you the truth when you don't like it. He won't mince words. He won't beat around the bush. He'll tell it exactly the way it is. He is no respecter of person, dear friend. He don't worry if you like it or if you don't like it. He's not, hey, you can say you don't believe it all that you want. That's not going to change it. It's still the truth. He is one, if we would say today, He's our prophet. But then, it is the garment of a king. He's life. Boy, the kings of that day, their subjects understood that their life was wrapped up in the king. Can I tell you today that as His subjects, our life ought to be wrapped up in the king? Now, I'm going to pause here for just a moment. I want to ask you a question. How much are you enjoying your walk with God right now? How much are you enjoying your life right now? How much joy are you having in this moment? Maybe you'd say, listen, preacher, I'm not having a whole lot. I would say this to you. It could be because your relationship to the King of Kings is out of whack. He's the king. Not only do you see His garment, you see His head and His hairs. Verse 14, His head and His hairs were white like wool, as white as snow. That white, of course, you know, the certain ruling bodies, the British government and court systems, even in the U.S. for many years, the judges would wear those white wigs, all right? Not because they were so pretty, but because of what that white hair symbolized. That white hair symbolizes wisdom. You know, the Bible tells us that we ought to be kind to the gray-headed. That we ought to show respect to the gray-headed. And this is why. Because they have lived life. They've been through what we are going through. And they've survived. And they have an amount of wisdom that we ought to be listening to. Now, I know that goes against what the world is saying. Because what the world's saying to our children today is this. You don't need to listen to Mom and Daddy. And you don't need to listen to Grandma and Grandpa. They're old fogies. Now, the way that they came up, it's not the way things are today. You don't need to listen to them. If you're a Christian, I want you to hear me real well on this, dear friend. Oh, yes, you do. John said when he turned, he saw Jesus. This is the way that He appeared. His head and His hair were white like wool. It speaks to the wisdom of God. Is there anybody wiser than Him? Is there anyone, dear friend, that can speak to our experience like Him? That white hair symbolizes a few things. First of all, it symbolizes His sinlessness. It's white like wool. Reminds us of what Isaiah said, does it not? Though our sin be as scarlet, they're going to be what? That's exactly right. When John sees Him, it reminds us of this fact. And listen, friend, this is where the church of the living God ought to shout a while. We're still serving a sinless God. He's above reproach. He is above sin. He is beyond sin. He cannot be defiled by sin. He is the sinless one. Not only does it speak of His sinlessness, it speaks of His agelessness. He is the ageless one. He's the one who always has been. The one that's always going to be. We live our life with certain fears, do we not? We worry about our family. We worry about the life of our family, the extent of their life. How long are we going to have our parents? How long are we going to have our grandparents? And when they're gone, it impacts us. We are left in that moment to ask this question. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to fill that void? How are we going to fill that gap? What are we going to do? Can I tell you, when Jesus appears to His church here, that it is an eternal reminder to us, He's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about waking up in the morning and finding the throne abdicated. You and I are never going to hear this again, dear friend, that they took Him and tied Him to a post and beat Him beyond recognition. We're never going to hear that they led Him to the brow of a hill somewhere that looked like a skull and nailed Him to a cross. And we are never, ever going to hear these words again, that the Son of God died. He is the ageless one. Also tells me this. Yeah, I'm not going to get done, but I'm going to finish here. It also tells me this. When I was a lot younger, after I'd been called to preach, I sat down with my granddad one day. I called him Pawpaw. And I'd watched my Pawpaw read the Bible all my life. Watched him go to church. I never saw one person walk into his home that he didn't love on. It was always remarkable to me, because there's some walked in there I didn't really like, but he always loved on them. And I sat down with him one day and I said, Pawpaw, tell me about how you got saved. He told me about a revival meeting that they were having several mountains over from where he lived. How he walked over those mountains, went to that church, walked back at night by the light of a lantern. How he was at church that night and got under conviction. And he asked Jesus to save him. I can still see my Pawpaw just as plain as day sitting there before me, and tears welling up in his eyes. And I'm looking at me and saying, I know this. That day Jesus saved me. A few years ago, I said to my dad, I said, Dad, tell me the story about how you got saved. He got to telling the story how he'd gone to church for a long time, went to an old dead church for a long time and never heard the gospel. Started dating my mom. Went to a mountain church, and it was quite different, because up there, if you sit on the first 3 rows, you got a bath by the time you got done. Just got kind of like y'all. We'll hand some napkins out when it's over. He said he sat there that morning. That preacher got up there and preached. He said, I never heard anything like that. He said, I'm going to be honest with you, it kind of scared me. He said, I thought he was out of his mind. He said, boy, he got to talking about some things. All of a sudden, it got stirring in me. He said, I walked away that day. I didn't get saved. He said, but all that week, all I could think about, what that preacher said. He said, I could see him there in that pulpit. And his preacher said, I went back the next Sunday. He said, he'd done the same thing. He preached like a wild man Sunday. He said, I sat there. He said, I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest. He said, when it was over, I went and I asked Jesus to save me. And you know what he did? He saved me. 47 years ago, on a Sunday night, after service, at the home of our pastor, as a little boy, I knelt down in front of that old couch, and I asked Jesus Christ to save me. That night, the greatest thing happened to me. That night, something took place in my life that I've not gotten over to this day. And I don't care who understands it and who don't understand it. I don't care if you sit there and you doubt it and they doubt it out here, dear friend. This is what I'm telling you. This is what I know. The same God that saved my granddaddy, the same God that saved my daddy, is the same one night came my way and saved me. Come here, Sebastian. You'd look at me and you'd say, you're an old man. That's right, I'm an older man. Same God that touched me came his way not too long ago. And he called out on him. And I want to tell you the same. Hey, listen to me. The same God that called Moses called to him. The same God, dear friend, that led the children of Israel through that sea, led him through the valley of death, dear friend, and brought him to life eternal. That's the one I'm telling you about this morning. That's the confidence I got. Thank you, buddy. I love you. What do we say about him? That's my King. That's my Lord. I can tell you this.